Our body is one big chain. Even if we are working one specific area, that doesn't mean that's the only area we're going to focus on. We have to be aware of other areas around it to make sure we are not compensating, to make sure everything is properly aligned, so then that way we're getting full maximum benefit out of that movement. So we're going to be talking about glutes. So glutes and how they activate is very close relationship to our spine and our hip placement. So our hips can rotate back, it can rotate forward. So it can do this motion right here. So it might be very small. So even if my whole trunk right here is as stiff as a board and it's not moving, I can still rotate my pelvis back and forth. And that small little movement right there is going to make a huge difference. Anytime we do a movement, we want our spine in neutral position. Neutral position meaning straight. We don't want the hips tucked forward because then that spine is going to be curved in at the bottom because our spine is all the way connected down here. It's in between our tailbone. So how we rotate our hips affects our spine alignment. So like I said, we don't want our spine and our hips tucked in, but we also don't want it overarched and extended. We want it right in the middle. But finding that neutral spine can be hard because you can be having a non-neutral spine throughout your day-to-day life and you don't even know. So I used to be that way. If I was just standing here relaxed, I used to stand like this, which right now you can see my waist looks a little bit thicker, my glutes don't look as round, it just doesn't look as proper. Versus if I force myself into neutral line assignment where I'm standing up, I'm pressing my deep inner core in and I'm slightly rotating my hips back, this is technically a neutral spine. So we just went from this to this. So very small little change, but you can see right away how that affects the hips and how that affects the glutes. Even just from a visual standpoint, when I'm standing in proper hip alignment, my waist looks smaller, my glutes look bigger. If I am tucking my hips in, I automatically makes my waist look bigger and my glutes look smaller. So you can see just even a visual difference right away. Now the thing is, I want to keep this hip and spinal alignment throughout all of my exercises. So this is where videotaping yourself doing an exercise really comes in handy. Because if you are videotaping yourself and it looks like that lower part of your back is always just very thick, it looks very prominent, and it just looks like the glutes are just kind of tucked in and not really there, that means your lower back or your spinae erectors, which is that muscle right here on your lower back, is being activated, and so your lower back is taking over and not making your glutes do the work. So you might not necessarily feel it in your lower back, because if your lower back has been taking over the load and has been doing that extra work for years and years and years, it's built up, it's strong, and it's taking on that work, and it's so used to taking on that work, you don't even really feel it working anymore because it's just used to it, it's just normal. Versus if we can make sure our line or our hip is in proper alignment, it's gonna take out that lower back and it's gonna allow that glute to work. Now, getting that spine in proper alignment, at first you might feel like it's working that lower back, but in a different way. You can flex your lower back by doing this, but rotating your hip is just using more of that deeper muscle inside. So, long story short, we want to make sure that our hip or our spine is in nice neutral alignment. The hips are rotated back, But when we're rotating the hips back, make sure that core is still tucked in and everything is nice and flat. We don't want to rotate and then curve the spine. You don't want your hips like that, because right here, I can't really tuck that core in. But if I can keep my hips rolled up and then tuck in my core, that's when I hit neutral alignment. So going from here, from just tucking my core in to right there. So I would even just practice holding this neutral position by keeping the hips up, keeping that core tucked in nice and tight, especially that lower stomach area. Just practice holding that position. Once you are used to just holding this position, then that's when we can start incorporating it in those other exercises. So if we're doing an RDL, I'm starting out in neutral hip alignment, and I'm going to think about keeping my shoulders all the way down to the bottom of my hips in the same position. The only thing that's changing is that I'm hinging right here at my hips and pushing it back. But my spine and my hips are not being rotated at all. And then from here, I'm just taking my hips and I'm pushing it forward. And when I come up and when I end, I should still be in neutral hip alignment. If I come up and I end like this, then guess what? I tucked my hips under and I was having this rotation throughout the movement, which is a no-no. So keep the hips in neutral spine, going down, and then when you come up, keep the hips in neutral alignment. So it ends like that. So another way is thinking about how we're contracting the glutes. A lot of people think when you are squeezing your glutes, you're doing this motion right here, which is essentially tucking the hips in. Yeah, you might feel your cheeks squeezing together, but the only issue with contracting your glutes like this, one, you're not activating the upper glute at all. And two, you're tucking your hip under, which is putting your spine in a non-neutral position, which is then putting you in a position to get injured and to get hurt. So by combating all of that, we're going to keep that spine in neutral position and think about squeezing those cheeks together without moving the spine. So you probably can't really see it too much, but I'm not rotating the hips at all. I'm keeping my hips still, but I'm squeezing my cheeks together and then I'm opening them up. I'm squeezing my cheeks together and then I'm opening them up. So when you're doing that movement, that's the exact same thing that you were thinking about doing. So if we're going in that RDL, again, neutral spine. When I'm going down, I'm thinking about opening up those cheeks. It sounds weird, but think about opening up those cheeks, trying to spread it super wide, like there's two hands at the side of your hips. And when you go down, your hands on your hips are just reaching out, trying to grab onto something. And then when you come up, those hands are squeezing everything together. So neutral spine. When we're going down, think about those hands opening up, reaching to the side and reaching back. And then when you're coming up, everything is squeezing together with that neutral spine. Another way to think about it is in a squat. When you are squatting down, we're opening up those glutes. We're reaching. And then when you're coming up, think about like pinching a towel right in between those cheeks. Like you're just trying to pick something up. Or that you have like a penny in between your cheeks. And when you come down, you're letting that penny go. And when you're coming up, you're trying to pick that penny back up. But like I said, keeping your hips in that neutral position still. So I'm flexing my glutes. It's just still in that neutral position. So that's really going to save the lower back and not have that lower back activated. So that's the RDL, that's the squat. But one other movement I want to touch on is the abductor machine, because this is where I see it a lot. So again, take a video of yourself doing the abductor machine. If it looks like, your lower back is really thick and bulky and your glutes are just kind of tucked under and it just doesn't look flattering, that is a sign that your lower back is taking over and not allowing those upper glutes to activate. When you're doing abductors, you should feel it on the side, but you should feel it on those upper glutes as well. And we're talking about the machine where you sit down and you're opening up your legs, pushing outward. So with this movement again, when you're sitting down on that abductor machine, neutral spine, which is right here. A lot of people, they'll try to bury down and they'll sit there and they'll kind of curve and their back will look like this. Even if I bring my shoulders back, you can still see that my tail is tucked under. Versus if I'm on that machine and I have a neutral spine, it looks like that. But my core is tucked in. So in the front, everything is still flat. In the back, there's that slight curve. So I'm holding onto that machine, and then same thing, when I'm pressing my legs out, I'm gonna think about squeezing those cheeks together as hard as I can by maintaining that neutral spine. And then when I'm bringing those legs in, I'm reaching everything open. So reaching, squeezing, reaching, squeezing. And even when I'm reaching, I'm still technically keeping tension, because when you reach, feel that intensity. Even when you do it with your arm, if you reach your hand out, yeah, it might be stretching that muscle, but do you feel that muscle contraction when you're really trying to reach for something? It's the same thing on your glutes. You're still keeping contraction and you're still keeping tight when you're reaching, and you're still keeping contraction and you're squeezing when you're coming in. So it's still intense the whole entire time. It's just through those different emotions. I guess one last thing is hip bridge. We're gonna do that as well. And then that will be the last movement, I swear. But with the hip bridge, where a lot of people go wrong with this movement is that hip rotation that we were talking about. When they come up, they really arch the back. The stomach is up, the hips are tucked under. It's not a neutral spine. And when they come down, then they relax. So they're sitting there and they're doing a glute bridge that looks like this. That is not good. And you can see, it looks like I got no ass in this position. Versus if I'm tucking my core in, I'm in a neutral spine, which when you're in a neutral spine and you're laying down, you should have just a little gap in your back. If your back is completely against the ground, that means you're tucking your hips under. If you're doing abs and you're doing like toe touches or something, that's great because that's activating your core. But in a glute bridge, we're trying to work glutes. We're not trying to work abs. So you want that neutral position where there's just that slight little gap in your back, but the front of your core is still perfectly flat. So from here, I'm maintaining that position from my shoulders down to the bottom of my hips. It is a stiff board. It is not going to rotate or move at all. The only thing that is happening is I'm hinging from my hips and I'm bringing the hips up. I'm keeping that core tucked in, and you can see, you're already seeing a little bit more glutes in this position. I'm squeezing everything together and then keeping it as I'm going down. Coming up with it, squeezing everything, coming down with it. So no rotation at all in those hips. Going back and forth. Now, if this is new to you, this might not be something you can just pick up right away. It's gonna take time, it's gonna take consistency. I recommend taking a lot of videos of you doing the movement to check your form and seeing how it looks. I personally did not know I had this issue until I started filming myself. And I was just like, I know I have decent glutes, but it just doesn't look right. In the video, it just looks like I have no butt. My back looks overpowering. I'm like, it doesn't look right. And that's because I didn't have my spine in that neutral position. And that neutral position makes a huge difference. So that is going to be how a neutral spine is in relationship to contracting your glutes. It's going to help build the upper glutes. It's going to help save that lower back. It's really going to help out with a lot of things. When you're trying a new technique, try it out with just body weight first. And then do very, very light weight and then work your way up. Do not try to add a huge amount of weight. Do not try to lift super heavy right away. Work on the technique, work on the form, and then start adding weight. Honestly, if you're doing really light weight but perfect form, you're probably gonna feel it a lot more versus when you were lifting super heavy and using the wrong form. But that is gonna be everything for today. I'm Coach Nicole from Team Golden Grit, and I will talk to you guys later.